Studies would be a great course to take.
And my name is Jalyn. I study linguistics and interdisciplinary studies, and I'm focusing on international politics and with a race and difference focus. And you want to just say like why you're interested? Okay.
All right, before we get into our presentation, I want to give us like an overarching view of where our presentation is going to head, our conclusion. So you'll see like it slowly progress back to the conclusion at the end of the presentation. Through our various research, we are the mass incarceration group, and we have found that mass incarceration is used as a normative tool of oppression, and we will now demonstrate why that is and the effects of mass incarceration and the intersectionality between education, housing, and healthcare, and how it oppresses African Americans in general. Could you move to the book reviews, please?
Yep. So basically here, this kind of shows our learning process, and these are the three main books that we've read to get, like, just to begin the foundation of our knowledge and what information.
We'll start with The Condemnation of Blackness by Khalil Muhammad. The Condemnation of Blackness is basically I won't say basically, but it is a book that talks about how being black became viewed as like normative criminality, why the black man is a criminal but the white man is not. Like, there's always been this sense in society that blacks are morally inferior because they commit more crimes and break more laws, so therefore that would support white supremacy and therefore further support segregation, discrimination. According to Khalil Muhammad, it all started post-Civil War and during the Reconstruction era in 1890. The first U.S. Census after the Civil War was produced, and it showed that African Americans, compared to other immigrants and whites, there was a higher rate of crime for them. So that statistic was internalized by scholars of the time that, well, hey, look, we have African Americans that are committing more crimes than other whites and immigrants, so therefore blacks must be morally inferior because they are breaking laws. Like, this is just another support for the white supremacy. With all of that, what the scholars did was when they did review this information, they found out that, hey, like, we should, that there's a drastic difference between whites and blacks. It further segregated whites and blacks to the point in which blacks were not receiving the same kind of help that other immigrants were to be integrated at the time. And besides, we were in a nation ailing from a civil war, and a lot of people needed a way to re-manifest the idea that white supremacy was real, because after the Civil War, blacks gained their independence. Through like various things such as like blacks not being assimilated compared to other immigrants and committing more crimes, blacks were not treated equally. Therefore, they were further placed into like housing because with I'm getting quite lost right now. It's quite a complicated subject. What we have is blacks were naturally at a disadvantage because they were viewed as criminals. They couldn't find jobs. Blacks can't find jobs because they're criminals. They can't go buy nice houses because they don't have money. They can't buy nice houses. They end up living with other poor blacks, living in the ghetto. Ghetto creates poverty. Poverty leads to crime. Crime reinforces the stereotype that blacks are criminals. With blacks as criminals, it just perpetuates the white supremacy all over again, and that's why we are here today.
Yeah, and basically, kind of bounce off of that, this is basically our website that kind of shows that basically the new Jim Crow is called. Our site, you guys can access this. It's under construction, so you'll see new things added every day. But our site is called Fight Against the New Jim Crow because essentially, there was slavery, and there was like the Civil War, and then there's segregation and Jim Crow. Basically, what we're arguing is mass incarceration of black people is the new Jim Crow. And then slavery by another name.
Yeah, I'll go into slavery by another name. So overall, the condemnation of blackness just goes to show that black criminality was actually viewed as a thing, normatively. So we move on to slavery by another name, and it basically moves on to about the mass incarceration of African Americans. And at that point, there have been many laws that have put into place in prisons in which you were forced to work in a prison. unless you have some kind of disability. So if we're to suppose that blacks are disproportionately incarcerated and we're forcing incarcerated individuals to work, it's just another form of slavery all over again.
And then it's called convict leasing, and that happened. It happened maybe like over 100 years ago. The book talked about, and then our third book is The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. I really suggest reading that one. She references convict leasing and how it still operates today. And basically her argument is, how mass incarceration is this new Jim Crow and how it's a new way to strip people of their rights in a colorblind society. And basically she's talking about, now we're in the time where there's black exceptionalism. That's how she says it. Sorry, I forgot to here. Black exceptionalism. So, we now have a black president. And in society, some people can make the argument like, oh, we've reached the final stage. We have the black president. We're fine now. Wrong. We're not fine. We're still in a colorblind society. And she highlights basically how race is actually working in this society. So I'm going to go to my blog page. I still got to add a lot to it. But she starts off with an argument about Reagan's term for presidency. Let me find it so we have it. So like Reagan's war on drugs policy. And you'll see too that our group overlaps with the other three groups too, like health, education, housing. So basically, Reagan announced in '82 that basically he set a war on drugs. But what a lot of people didn't know, and what I didn't know before I read the book, was a lot of drugs were put in poor black neighborhoods. And the CIA knew about this, and these were all during the time we were supporting Nicaraguan soldiers when they were fighting for their freedom. So basically, we found out from the book that the CIA formally admitted that they knew about this drug trafficking from there to here, and they prohibited the police from investigating it. So essentially, it's kind of like a setup. The drugs were placed into these poor black communities, and people got addicted. The drugs were circulated, and then so conveniently, Reagan, pushes this war on drug policy and creates this, started this creation of criminal black man image. And what Michelle is arguing is that unlike, slavery and Jim Crow, someone could argue you're black, so you are this. They try to make black a term for being inferior, but to combat it, during the civil rights movement, we could say things like black is beautiful and embrace the stereotype, and it could be changed, try to change it into something positive. But with this new label of criminal black man or criminal black woman, it's harder to embrace the stereotype, to defeat the stereotype, right? So if you say being a criminal is okay, it's hard to detach the negativity of that label. So it's basically this new way to suppress black people because of this new stigma. And she further proves that it's a stigma because she kind of makes it so, she compares it to passing. Does everybody know historically what passing is in the black community? So basically, so passing, if you have light skin, if you're mixed, you could pass and become white or of a higher society. But now with this new criminal black stigma, it's harder to overcome that, and she argues that passing is still operating today with this new stigma. Basically, a new way of black shaming. So she draws examples of families who have incarcerated family members. So the mother and the children will pretend that the husband doesn't exist when he's incarcerated, because when you go to work, when you go to school, if you say oh, my dad's incarcerated or in jail, they're gonna treat you differently. And that all plays into why I was interested in this topic, because it's a real thing, my father, to be transparent, was incarcerated, which is why I'm interested in this topic. And the aftermath of that is, my house was put on the television. I'm an A student, and I'm at Emory University now, but in middle school, when my father was incarcerated, teachers treated me differently. My mother had to hide it when she went to work. It's just a new form of making black communities feel like they need to pass. They need to play off that their family doesn't have criminal charge, when in the long run, like, this was all the drugs were implanted, and then after Reagan's campaign, it's created this new way to basically create black shame and a new way to suppress that class. And then Kale, True.
I have a little graph